is settling in. Dr. Vokes, Dr. Miller. All right, doctors are seated.
Dr. Larry,
Good.
Dr. Mo, Dr.
Well, welcome back. I'm not going to talk about bicycles right now. What I'm going to do right now is take the pleasure of introducing our keynote speaker for today. Like myself, and like maybe some of you out in the audience, our keynote, Dr. John Jensen, is a graduate of the Geography Department right here at Cal State Fullerton. He graduated back, 1971, 40 years ago that he graduated from Cal State Fullerton. It made me think, what was Cal State Fullerton like back in 1971? And it's hard to figure out some of those things, but I went back and I looked at our catalogs, our class schedules from 1971. Right off the bat, you students may not even know, we used to print the schedules. We don't even print them anymore. Everything's online. But in 1971, things were groovy, for sure. The Humanities Building that's on the cover of the first one of these in the record that had a photo, and then this is the first one that was in color the very next spring, right? Technology's changing. The Humanities Building was only recently built. It was finished in 1969. A few classes were in there at that time. And I know what you're thinking, right? What did it cost to go to Cal State Fullerton back then? Well, there's the fees for you. Yeah, I know. Pretty exciting times. And so now Dr. Jensen finished at Cal State Fullerton in 1971, scampered off to BYU for a master's degree, couldn't stay away from Southern California, I think, and came back to UCLA and finished up his PhD at UCLA. And he, as you'll see in just a minute, is a remote sensing expert. He studies satellite imagery and satellite data. 1971, he graduated from Cal State Fullerton. 1972 was when Landsat satellites were first launched and made operational. So he was really on the cutting edge of this technology, and it's a pleasure to have him back here. He graduated from UCLA, and then through this sort of circuitous route, ended up at the other USC, the University of South Carolina, where he is now the Carolina Distinguished Professor of Geography there, studying remote sensing. And I had a chance to chat with him over the last couple of days. I've been reading some bio information and things like that. And the item that struck me most is how proud he is to have mentored students. 30 some odd master's students or more, or PhD students, 60 PhDs. I got the numbers backwards in my head. It's a lot. And even if it was just one, the fact that he says, and all the things I've done, by the way, he's literally written, I was going to say the book on remote sensing, 2 books on remote sensing, the primary textbooks for remote sensing curriculum across the United States and other places in the world. So yeah, that kind of thing, articles, all the academic stuff that professors think are important. But when he says what he's proud of, it's that he mentored students, and that to me makes him the best geographer I know. John Jensen, please come on up and share your wisdom with us. Thank you.
I'm a wanderer, so I don't want to stand behind that podium. Just stay out here. It's a real pleasure to be here today. I've asked John to change the slides for me, see if I can do this multimedia thing, holding this up at the appropriate time. Go ahead, please. I made this chart up to show my genealogy, which you're part of. And if you notice here, actually I went to BYU Hawaii for a year. I went to Cypress Junior College for a year, right up the street, grew up in Anaheim. Then I came here for my junior and senior year, took a geography course by a guy named Bob Sager in the Department of Geography here. I loved it. I said, "Do they pay you to do this stuff?" He says, "Yeah, I think so." And I love cartography, so I took cartography. I took the technical courses. Then I went on and got my master's at Brigham Young University under Dale Stevens, again in cartography. It wasn't even called remote sensing then. It's called air photo interpretation. And knew I wanted to do this for my living. Went back to UCLA, had children, worked at night at Aero Service Corporation, and became a certified photogrammetrist running that machine right there. That's the way your topographic maps were created and have been created for years and years and years. Learned how to scale and level models and do all the photogrammetry, which is really some civil engineering. I worked under Norman J.W. Thrower, the #1 cartographer in the world at the time. I don't know if you know, Arthur Robertson was the #1 cartographer before him. He trained Norman Thrower. Norman Thrower trained me. But Norman Thrower was not good at remote sensing, so he let me go up to Santa Barbara and work under one of his students, Jack Estes, and David Sim, and the 2 best remote sensing geographers in the United States. So all right around here, I had all these great geographers to learn from. And so I got my doctorate at UCLA, a postdoc here. My first position, I'm in California. I was born in Oroville, California. My first position is in Georgia. That was a massive culture shock. And I like Georgia, though. Our kids have all grown up there. And I was a tenured associate professor there, but they made me the offer to come to South Carolina and write, along with a few other people, the PhD program and get it. They only had a master's, so we wrote it. It took 4 years. And now just this last National Research Council announcement, we're in the top 10 of geography departments in the nation. So, and our technique area is one of the more powerful ones. So we're doing pretty well. And that's my genealogy, and you're part of it right here. So I appreciate that. You only had 3 buildings when I was here, no freeways, and hardly any trees. And it was nice. My wife, who's here with me, got her degree in accounting in the business building here. So this is part of my life. That course right there changed my whole life. Okay? Been a great career. Okay, next slide, please. These are the 2 textbooks. I just put them up here so you know a little bit about me. And they're used all over the world. One is the fundamental remote sensing text. The other one is the fundamental digital image processing text. They're both 600 pages. And, you know, that's what I do. Next slide. I also put this up here. Next slide. I put this up here because I work a lot with the National Academy of Sciences. That's the #1 scientific body in the United States that sets policy, especially for government. And these are just some, I think there's 8 of them or so I worked on in the last few years. It's a big deal to be on these committees. I wrote this one all by myself almost, and for the professors, they know this, how hard it is to get things reviewed. I had 42 people I had to answer to reviews. 42 people reviewed that. Each one had 10 pages of comments. I had to address them all. Every single line you had to address before it comes out. It's way harder than your master's thesis, way harder than your doctorate dissertation. But every one of these documents this is the one that's setting the standard for how we do elevation mapping for flood control right now in the whole nation. That's what FEMA uses, is that document right there. This is how we reviewed NASA's recent program. We told the USGS how to do things here. So, and I have a brand new one that I just got put on last week. That's the National Geospatial Agency that hires all the people for the government to do geospatial type things, cartography, remote sensing. They're really worried they're not going to have enough people to do all they want to do in the next 20, 30 years. So it's a Geospatial Workforce Development Committee I'm on. It starts on March 21st with 9 other people, and we'll figure out how are you going to be able to work for them. They're not going to have near enough people. So that's the kind of things I do too. Next slide. Well, I'm a firm. I don't know what I'm going to say here today. You're going to get a feeling for what I think is important in my field of study. And so one of the things I tell people is I don't like people come and say, I want to be a remote sensing expert. I say, well, that's great, but I really want you to be a scientist in some systematic body of knowledge like soils, urban geography, anthropology. It doesn't matter to me. Criminal justice. I want a systematic body of knowledge. I'll teach you about how to use remote sensing science within your systematic body of knowledge. And I also want you to be happy going in the field, not just playing video games all day. I want you to be out in the field with your fingers in the dirt and the mud so that you can calibrate what we're going to see from the sky, so to speak. And if you don't know what's on the ground, how are you going to interpret what's when we get our images from the airborne platforms? So this is my son, who's a professor, associate professor in remote sensing at BYU, because he went all those field trips on the field. I drug him everywhere as a slave to me. And I'd say, climb that tree with this pole, put the flag up at the top of the tree. He'd do it. Move that snake over there. And all these times, and he got his degree in computer science, then got his doctorate at the University of Florida in remote sensing and botany. And so that's what he does now. We're in Utah here. We're calibrating a spectroradiometer that he's holding with a reference plate. We're doing some work with some rangeland studies we're doing there. But I love field work. I'm a geographer. I don't like to wear this. I wore this. You never know what to wear. So I wore this. But we love to be out in the field, and that's the only way I can interpret my images correctly, is to get out in the field. So I loved your field work presentations. In fact, I'm impressed with the faculty. It's a great group of faculty. And only none of the ones I worked with are here. Gone. Okay, next. Well, let's talk about remote sensing in the environment. This is not going to be high level, but it's not going to be that low level either. It's going to be somewhere in the middle. Maybe you'll learn some things about remote sensing in the environment. Our goal is to use a non-contact sensor. You're remote sensing me right now with your eyes. That's your remote sensing device. In fact, you're the world's best right now. We don't have anything that really competes with a human being. And our goal is to obtain the most accurate measurements using the most appropriate sensor on the most appropriate platform. It's hard to get the best measurement from the best sensor from the best platform, and a lot of people don't know how to do it. So there's an art to it. And I have to keep up with platform sensors, and I have to know a lot about the terrain. Plus I do digital image processing. I develop the mathematics and the algorithms to extract the information from the images, besides doing it visually. Next slide. Just a couple of slides here. We started off with our platforms being balloons. This guy does not have the shortest legs in the world. He's kneeling down in there. Okay? So this is Gaspard Felix Turnachon. In 1858, he takes a tethered balloon up. He takes the first air photo from a balloon. Okay, that's where it started. And to this day, the point directly that we look down directly, the center of it, if you draw lines through the photograph, a 9x9 photograph, the exact center is called Nader. It's named after him, Nader. Gaspard Felix Turnachon, also known as Nader. He was basically a French photographer who took a balloon up, took a photo. Next slide. And we had some other things. We had other platforms, and we would, even in 1903, there's an article in Scientific American by Neubronner that talks about how to use pigeons for planes. And you strap a camera on them, next slide, and there's a whole squadron of them. And these are 70-gram cameras. I mean, this is where we were. You know, we haven't come a long ways in a century and a few. You know, these guys actually, some of them got medals in World War II. Next slide. And then we finally get heavier than air aircraft with motors and airfoils that get us airborne. We eventually get rockets and get in space. But this guy, there's the camera. This guy's all happy because he's going to get to fly this thing. You know, it's probably not very bright because they crashed all the time. This guy's got the right idea. What's going to happen to me here as I hold this? I guess they got seat belts on. Who knows? This is where we come from. You know, 100 years ago, we didn't have much, and now I'm not going to talk about all the space. You grew up with space. You know, we're in space now. We also still do a lot of airborne, not just space. Next slide. We have lots of different sensor systems. This is ones your parents grew up with, just a negative reversal of tone and geometry with a lens of the real world. Now you've grown up with this, digital cameras. Inside your camera you have an area array. That's what's in them. Well, our remote sensing digital cameras cost $300,000 and $400,000 and $500,000 each. Yours cost $22.95. And so we have this on a very large scale. I'll show you more. We have scanning systems. We have linear push broom arrays. We have rotating whisk broom arrays. And we also have hyperspectral arrays. I'll show you some of these as we go along. We still do a lot of these two here, analog aerial photography and digital. It hasn't gone away. In fact, it's become just even more important. But we have a lot of other sensors we'll talk about. Next slide. Also, I like to tell people, you know, I'm a remote sensing expert. I'm really a GI scientist. Okay, GIS, the Geographic Information Sciences. I'm a GI scientist because I'm expert in cartography, Geographic Information System, remote sensing. Those are the GI sciences. I also know some surveying, but those are the GI sciences. And we can help other people in these other systematic areas, the physical sciences, the biological sciences, the social sciences. We can help them with any of their geospatial problems. And we're not going to force ourselves on them, but we've got some great tools now to be able to share with them. In my classes, I get people from all walks of life in my classes. Last semester I had 4 anthropologists in my classes because everything's spatial to an anthropologist. And they do things now with ground penetrating radar, terrestrial LiDAR. They're totally into remote sensing and mapping. Anyway, mathematics and logic, of course, is a science unto itself. It sits right here. All of the mathematics and logic and the GI sciences, we do and support these other type of sciences. And I like to keep that in mind. That's the way I organize it. I work for the most part in here. Every one of my articles uses GIS and cartography, but I'm usually working in some physical problem, maybe wetland mapping or something. That's the way I keep track of what I do. Next slide. Don't use this as an eye chart. Just realize that when we do remote sensing, I state my problem. Maybe I formulate a hypothesis. Based on that, I go do my in situ measurements, gets me out in the field. my field and lab work, I collect collateral data. I'm going to get every kind of information I can possibly get. Soils maps, transportation maps, whatever, geology maps, that's collateral information. Then I've already decided I'm going to use maybe passive remote sensing or active radar, LiDAR, sonar, or these other type of remote sensing systems. I get the data, I can either process it visually with my 2 eyeballs, that's analog image processing, or digitally. And I've worked my life developing these algorithms to extract information. Next slide. All right, so I'm gonna talk about why we do remote sensing, why it's advantage here, and I'm gonna go a little more deeper as I go along. But first of all, these are some of the reasons. We're gonna have an aerial perspective that you can't get any other way. We're gonna document change, and changes it gives us information about the processes at work. We're gonna gain information beyond what you can perceive. Your eye's only sensitive to blue, green, red. I can make sensors that are sensitive to things you can't perceive. And also, we can get information extracted over terrain that you can't always get to, denied areas. Look at some of those. Next slide. Really it's a remarkable thing what mankind has done. We're able to leave the orbit of this Earth. You might say, you grew up with that big deal at rockets. Hey, getting airborne and being able to look at more than the place that you look at beyond the horizon is a huge human technological feat. This is on the way to the moon. They look back, they take a picture like this on Apollo 17. Some of these are said to, when you see the pale blue dot in the blackness of space, that's when people finally got interested as the Earth is a sensitive, one-of-a-kind place. We haven't found anything like it. And for us to get a hemispherical view, we can do that all the time. Do it daily now. Every half hour I can get these views. Or I can put them all together, a bunch of images like a digital globe or a Google, and simulate. Next slide. But it's a fantastic Earth we have. And we can look at northern hemisphere, southern hemisphere, watch it change through time. And it really is a phenomenal capability to be able to watch our planet. I live in South Carolina. Starting in June, we have hurricane watch. From June to September, we watch all of them come and point a shotgun at our coast that's 200 miles wide, and we watch it for 6 months, but we know when they're coming a week away. A week away, we know they're coming, and so we watch because we have goes east here and goes west there, and just watches. A butterfly flaps its wings over here, we get a hurricane coming along. Goes up here in South Carolina where I live right there. Or goes, we used to pray that they go in the Gulf. We don't do that anymore, it's horrible for those people. So we just pray it goes somewhere else. Next slide. Okay, that's the big, back that up for a second. That's the geographic, unbelievable, hemispheric perspective. And then I can go all the way down, next slide, to the local, what we call extremely large scale perspective. This is one of our buildings on campus, the Solomon Blunt. And this is a pool, this is where students hang out and swim and stuff. But I can count people if I want. I can tell you what exactly the make of the car is if I want. I can tell you whether that grass is healthy in certain parts if I want. So we go from hemispheric right down to, it's not inner space, but it's microspace. And then we had the other one today, the extraterrestrial remote sensing, which was neat. We can turn these sensors the other way and do the things that we're talking about, which was great. And that's extraterrestrial remote sensing to us. Next one. Now, change. Watching change through time tells us about the process of work. How was it documented? Nobody knew except for the remote sensing before and after. We watched the process, we watched the change, we watched the process, and we can identify human rights violations. Next slide, things like that. We got tragedies that we deal with. We look at before and after. Iconos imagery before and after. Also have great LiDAR data, three-dimensional of it. We don't talk about it too much, but we document these type of problems all the time. Next slide. Military is a huge user. That's one of the reasons I'm going to this committee at National Academy of Sciences in a couple of weeks. We'll try to figure out where they're going to get the manpower to keep an eye on things throughout the world. It's pretty interesting in the world right now, isn't it, what's going on? Believe me, it's being monitored at the very highest. They have signal intelligence, which is your phone, and they have signal intelligence, SIGNET. They have image intelligence, this, and then they have human intelligence, HUMET. Those are the three types of intelligences brought to problems. And They need people, and I'm not saying you should go to work for them, because sometimes I don't agree with what they do. But sometimes I do agree with what they do, and they have good people. They need good people to. If they don't have good people in there, then we're in really big trouble. You gotta have ethics and know what's right and wrong, because all of this can be used for bad and for good. But in this case, this is not the U.S., this is not Russia, this is Israel. Why would Israel want to know if that submarine has left and gone under the ice cap right there and left? Why would they want to know that? Well, I don't know. They want to know. They keep track of when they come in. Every one of those is a big nuclear submarine. Okay? Lots of them here in this base up in Russia. And it's panchromatic. They don't care about color. They just want high resolution to see what the world is doing and whether it's a threat to them. It's called image intelligence. And it goes on all the time. I don't do anything that I can't hardly publish. There's a few things I do that I can't publish, but most everything I can publish, because I don't enjoy some of the dark work. Next line. Although this one was some of the dark work. Now, I put this in here because we're going to have a talk later on today about illicit drugs, right? Yeah. And a few years ago, the State Department had numbers about what they said was the cocaine production in South America. The CIA has been doing it for 50 years. They had one. The numbers didn't jive. They pulled 4 of us together. The President set up a committee, a 4-person committee, President of the United States. So I went up there for 3 months. We interviewed the CIA, we interviewed the State Department, and found they were doing things wrong in both of them, and we changed their whole program. But we had to get top secret clearance to look at all the way the CIA does things versus the way the State Department does things. And I'm not going to show any results here, or I'd have to kill you. So, but it's just pure remote sensing. We look at, this is what the coca looks like. This is what the agriculture version of coca looks like. And government-sponsored cocaine production. Indigenous, they try to hide it. And then the State Department goes and flies 50,000 flight lines of, in effect, Roundup on it per year. Not one flight line, 50,000. And I had the opportunity to go flying on one of these, and I said no, because everybody's shooting at them all the time. And they said on their helmets. They said on their helmets, because of these. And I said, Marcia was here with me, she said, don't go down there and do that. So a guy from DARPA who's single said, yeah, I'll go do it. And anyway, so I helped the CIA set up their remote sensing of cocaine in Putumayo, in Colombia, how they do it. And I set up the whole accuracy assessment system after this was all done, and showed them how to do it accurately, because this is gradually increasing the cocaine production, and they keep track of it. So I consider that an important contribution to humanity, because I don't think it's good for children to be having access to cocaine. Next line.